Okay, I will call this meeting to order. This is a city council study session, Monday, February 3rd, 2025. And we will start with introductions and start with Sarissa.
Sarissa Falk, Senior Management Coordinator.
Corinne Heine, City Attorney.
Mike Funk, City Manager.
Kizzy Copley, Ward 4.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn, at large and acting mayor.
Deb Calvert, at large.
Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
Brandon Dahman, Assistant City Manager.
Julie Wishnot, Community Development Director.
Kelly O'Day, Recreation Director.
Scott Borbin, Police Chief.
Kevin Fox, Fire Chief.
Darren Nelson, Finance Director.
Will Manchester, Public Works Director.
I'm Nate Thornton, I'm just a resident.
Kevin Ringhofer, resident for 40 years.
All right, and with that, I will turn it over to Mike.
Well, thank you, Acting Mayor Kimberly Wilburn, and Council, good evening. First thing on our agenda tonight is to talk about the 2025 Community Survey. I'm going to turn it over to Sarissa Falk here in just a second, but to tee it up, this is something that we started a couple years ago, bringing the survey to the council, and really wanted to get your feedback on the questions that we're posing. So what was included in the packet was last year's survey as reference, so you could get a sense for the questions that were asked last year. And at this point, I'm going to turn over to Sarissa to really kind of walk through the process, introduce you to Peter Leatherman. I think he's joining us here remotely to really talk through what themes you're looking for, perhaps, Council, in questions for this year. We did tee up a couple thoughts for you in the staff report, and we can go through those here in a second. Also invited this evening our directors. So our directors are also instrumental in the survey questions. Perhaps Peter or Sarissa will correct me here. Generally, our survey questions, 97% of those, 95, 97% of those are really routine questions. I shouldn't say routine, but generally questions we ask from year to year as we understand trends. We've been working with Peter Leatherman for over 20 years and his company with our annual community survey. Again, Peter will probably speak to that here, just the history. And we do ask a lot of those questions again from year to year, so we understand the value of the services that we're providing. We do some benchmarking with that data with other cities, and of course we use that internally for decision-making purposes. I think as an organization we strive to be decision-based, and so the feedback that we get from our annual survey really help us in the city level, and I say us also turning to our directors, using that trend information as they make decisions regarding programming, how we deliver services, if we need to change delivery services. So really just understanding the attitude of our community from year to year, because we know that there's events that happen, both on a state or national level, world level, that impact residents. So with that, really want to turn over to Sarissa. She's instrumental being our lead staff member as she pulls this together, working with our directors and certainly working with you, Council, here this evening. So I think Sarissa's going to just touch a little bit on her role and then some of the timelines coming up as it relates to getting this survey completed and back to you during the budget process. So with that, Sarissa, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So like you said, we have Peter Leatherman here representing Morris Leatherman Company, we've been using for 20 plus years. Their survey they do is done via the phone, and we survey about 400 residents. And the timeline is after today's conversation, staff will finalize, or we will work with Peter to finalize the questions, and the survey will be conducted in March. And then we will bring the results back in, I think it's the May 12th study session. So I'll just pass it over to Peter here, really get the conversation started. Peter, can you talk to make sure we can hear you, and then let us know if you can hear us as well? Okay, go ahead, Peter. You can start the conversation, and then we'll let Council chime in on topics and themes that you are interested in for this year's survey.
Absolutely. It's I meant to be there in person tonight, but I've developed the same illness my wife developed last night. So you don't want me with it. We wouldn't want to pass a microphone around right now. So I might mute myself. I might turn off the video if I start coughing or anything like that. So I think I think most people have been through the process before. I don't know. We could shorten it up by saying, does anybody have questions on methodology, or should we just go right in to questions, topics, anything like that?
I think right into questions.
Excellent. And would it be easier for timing? Do we want to go page by page, or should we just go? How does council prefer to review the survey? I know that the staff included, I think, potential bullet points for additional conversation of potential new topics. So I would leave it to the discretion of council.
Council, anybody have feelings on?
I've reviewed the questions from last year, so I don't know if anybody else needs to go over them, but I'm ready to jump in with, kind of any themes that we want.
Yeah, so it sounds like we don't need to go page by page. So.
Okay, I would.
If anybody
Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, my screen just went blank. Okay, as long as you're still on, I can still hear you. All of a sudden, all right, I just saw the logo. Yeah, so why, if since I don't know whose hands are up, should we just, whoever wants to share, we could get into the discussion? Excuse me.
I mean, I think I really thought that most of the questions were really very helpful. And, some of it really has to do, we ask questions like, do you think there's enough police presence, and is there too much? And, questions like that. And it would be, to me, I don't know if you're gathering like where they live. I think not so much changing the question but just possibly having a sense of, if people are thinking there's too much or too little of this or that, where do they live? Like, is there like an area where people, do you have access to that data?
We have it. Yeah, we keep track of the survey and set quotas based on the wards. So with your ward system, with a 400 sample, we have large enough cell sizes. We have roughly 100 in each of the 4 wards. So to go beyond that and get down to neighborhoods, that sort of thing, it would become way too small a cell sizes. But that's an interesting way that once we have the data, if there's something to flag, police presence or what have you, we could look if there are any statistically significant differences between the 4 wards, can help narrow it down for the council and the city. And we don't ask folks what ward they live in. Probably 2% of people know what ward they live in. We know what ward they live in. So we keep track of it internally.
And then the only other, I made a note around question 70, which is on page 10 of the survey results, about, the question is, what could the city do to improve opportunities for input? And we have certain quote unquote channels or conduits for information. So we have Minnetonka Matters, people have, we have our public meetings. And so I am just wondering, if anybody thinks that we need to sort of prompt people to think about the fact that we already have pretty good, we put out information, we have certain conduits for information. Do we want a question that prompts more, or do we want to just sort of leave it open-ended? Because, somebody was at a meeting recently saying we don't have, the communication was poor, and the mayor rightfully pointed out, no, we put out plenty of information, but people don't read it. or people don't access it. So I'm just wondering if there's a way to shape the question.
Yeah, maybe a way to say, you know, like some of the other questions, which ones are you familiar with, which have you used? So like Minnetonka memo, viewing the live stream of the city council meeting.
Well, this was specifically about input. The question number 70 was,
Yeah.
what could the city do to improve opportunities for input? And we have opportunities, we have meetings, we have neighborhood meetings, we have open houses, we have, you know, on specific topics, we have Minnetonka Matters. And so I'm just, is there a way to shape it? Because you know, once people know it's there, or if they're reminded.
Okay, so sort of the same
think-
thing, say, but just with those specific, like
Right.
Minnetonka Matters, coming to the open mic is not the right word, but the public comment section of the city council meeting, those type of things, finding out if people are aware of those and how many people have taken advantage of those.
And not just the items not on the agenda, but also if there are specific issues, they're welcome to come to the public meetings, you know, planning commission or whatever, and give their input there as well. But anyway.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. Kind of narrow it down. I wouldn't want to put the caveats of this, that, and then say, do you think you have enough opportunities for input? Because this necessarily is matching public opinion with perception, but perhaps a follow-up. So instead of no, what could the city do to improve? Say, prior to the survey, were you aware of, say, X, Y, Z? Minnetonka Matters, those sorts of things. So you could see whether it's an awareness. You know, this one, it's always difficult because there's a difference between having a say, and having your way. So I think if I understand you right, I can formulate something up to try to capture that. It goes just beyond, you know, well, the city doesn't listen. Well, the city not listen because you're not talking or you're not aware or what have you. Am I capturing that?
It's sort of the perennial issue because 51% of people said we need to have more proactive communication, and we do.
Yep.
And so that's part of, you know, that's one half of it. So that's the outgoing communication to residents. And then other residents said 29%, so almost 30% said we need to listen.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Yeah, just keep it. I apologize. Just keep in mind that is 29% of 23%, because it's those that said no. So it's still about 6%, and then the 51%. So it's about 12% of the community.
You know, and then other people said more opportunities.
Yeah.
So it just like, I'm trying to understand, you know, I'm trying to crack that nut, which I think every city tries to do. And I'm not sure how we do that.
Maybe it's different in what, or if they say no, instead of why, how would you prefer? Or do you know what so it's switch it to a how instead of a why question.
I like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. Let me frame it up for review.
And if I can jump in, Kimberly and Deb and Peter, I think in context, correct me if I'm mistaken. Deb, are you asking more general? How can the city provide input? Because question 70 is teed up based on question 69. Question 69 is, do you feel Minnetonka residents have appropriate opportunities for input into the zoning and development decision-making process?
Oh.
If that answer is no, then question 70 is asked. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that's if you're thinking more broad communications, that's further down in the survey. But question 70 is more related to zoning and land use decisions. Thank you.
And what did you say, Julie?
134 is the other
It's
question.
some more general.
Mhm.
How are you getting your information, or are you familiar with these?
Paula, did you have something?
So so I just, Deb, I just want to just want to clarify with you on, are you thinking more questions that are in the 130s that we should take a look at those, or with this question 70 as it relates to it's more of a development question?
Well, I mean, we do ask questions about Minnetonka Matters and the other, listening to meetings, et cetera. So we get a little bit more. And I do think that the planning and zoning is going to be an issue that people pay attention to. I think it'll receive more scrutiny than other things. So, I think the how people can provide input, I think this would still be a good survey question to drill down on, because I think it's just going to get more scrutiny than.
For number 70.
Yep.
Okay. I could frame that up for review.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that
Thank you. That was a good clarification.
Other topics?
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay.
You. I would, I guess, have some questions on some of the staff suggested themes. Specifically, first of all, on bonding, are we talking about the marsh? What are we talking about in terms of asking about bonding? That was one of the suggested things in the packet. So that's one question. And then another comment is, we're talking about having a zoning commission now that's going to be working for the next 18 months. Do we need to have any opportunity for feedback, survey results regarding development? In terms of, density, smart growth, village centers, that sort of thing. Is this an opportunity to perhaps get some insight and community feedback in those areas? And then in terms of police, the last thing would be, staff mentioned e-bikes. Similarly, we've talked, a lot of the questions in the survey currently have, specific questions, but maybe, how concerned are you about the following? If we can get a sense of what's most important to people in terms of, is it crime? Is it speeding? What police matters? Police, public safety matters are most important to them, I think would be helpful. So because one thing I get all the time, lots of times from residents, I think all of us do, is traffic calming and those issues that we're, whether there's a lot we can do about it or not, getting a sense of how much of an issue that is for, more people would be helpful. And then last thing, I noticed the sales tax from last year said, would you be in favor of increasing a sales tax? Currently, we don't have a sales tax in a local sales tax for Minnetonka, so it wouldn't be actually increasing it. It would be enacting one. If I'm understanding correctly, I could be wrong on that.
Right. You're increasing the overall sales tax, but that's a fair point. Maybe frame it up. And that's something to talk about specifically, because it was conceptual last year.
Right.
And so maybe it's, would you support a 0.5-cent sales tax for, I don't know if you're at the point to explore XYZ, what the potential uses would be, but I think that's a very fair change to it. If that's indeed, if we're talking, and that's what most communities, a 0.5-cent sales tax would be for. And we could keep it, generic. We just have to provide funding for capital improvements. Perhaps you're at a point that we could do a such as XYZ. But I don't know where you are in the planning process with that.
Yeah, well, and I don't know, we have to have a discussion again as a council, whether we want to go ahead with exploring a sales tax, and part of that would be public relations, educating the public about the sales tax and what it would go for. So I don't know if we want to have, I guess, kind of a pre-question and then ask it again to see if there's a shift in attitudes on a sales tax.
Majority were in favor of it last year, so.
And sort of along the same lines, I had a sort of overall general note, which is there wasn't a bonding bill, and sales tax for the suburbs were shot down in the legislature. And but we have these big funding needs that I'm sure you're aware of, like Opus, our recreation facilities, our fire stations. And so my question was, what questions can we tee up to get support for that funding, since they are really important things that are important to a lot of people. A lot of people would think that's important. If we just lay out what the needs are, that, our recreation facilities need upgrades, that, what we're trying to do with our fire stations and why, and, the needs in Opus. And it's a lot, I know we're trying to keep the questions. We're trying not to grow the questions. We're trying to shrink the number of questions, but it's a lot of money. I mean, just the fire stations was what, 50 million? It's a lot of money. So, maybe we just pick one, or I don't know what. I wanted to throw that out to the group because it's a lot of money that we need.
We could go about it in a way that gets you data in a generic manner. Would you support the use of additional city funding for upgrading recreational facilities? And give perhaps a few examples. Similarly with, I just write on the fire station. I could work with the staff on that. And then get in concept the support or opposition for the use of city funding. And for those that support, would you support a property tax increase or what have you, additional tax increase of some sort? I could work through how to frame it up, but that can give you a sense of priority from the community on where they're at right now.
And that's
and perhaps it's an education piece, or what have you. If it's not there, the fire station, did a survey with Dayton last year on their fire station situation. They had a lot of people that weren't aware of response times. So now it's a communication discussion that they're going through. So do you think that would help capture data for the council that would be helpful?
Yeah,
I think so.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I think just to add to what's been said, Peter, Peter's really good at framing up these questions. But I think when we went back to Paula's point about bonding, why that was in the staff report, and just adding more context for mainly Peter and for people listening, is as council, when we've gone through our budget last year and we look to the future, we know, as already stated, we have some significant capital improvement needs. Fire stations has already been talked about. We have that coming to the study session in a couple months. Chief Fox will be here and talk about what that looks like. That's the $30-50 million range, depending on scope. Talked about perhaps the Marsh being another, perhaps $20 million. We've talked about Opus being another, perhaps $30 million. Other rec facilities, so community center in Williston, still some question marks in that. So quick math, we can get to 80 to 100 million pretty quickly, Peter. And so I think the question kind of gets at both of them, like both bonding and sales tax. And it's something along trying to find out where the appetite for the community is in terms of, do you support bonding of some level? Do you support sales tax to pay for these things? The money's got to come from somewhere. And so I think trying to vet out a little bit with the community what the appetite or the best funding mechanism might be, whether that's bonding, which is really dependent upon all of our taxpayers, or supplementing perhaps bonding with sales tax. Different people pay part of that pie. We did some initial analysis, council, if we recall. Mr. Nelson worked with the University of Minnesota Extension. And in that analysis, if we were to implement a sales tax, 60% of the sales tax collected would come from residents outside the city. So it's just a matter of who pays for perhaps that funding. And I think as a city, it would be helpful to know.
And that's, that's
kind of
actually,
those- So
that
I'm
was
kind of giving you
part-
overarching some additional context, Peter, and how that's
Yeah.
worded, whether it's one question, multiple questions, and getting, I think, at that.
Well, I think that that's a really absolutely, that all makes sense. And kind of the, to take it to the 30,000 foot level, if the legislature, God love them, can't even meet, what are the odds that we're going to have is a local sales tax option in the works
Yeah.
in time for it to be helpful for the city?
Well, not this.
Yeah, good question.
It's still on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, God only knows. You can't. We don't know what a quorum is in the state, so it's hard to say what they're going to do. But
Some
it-
of us know.
it begs the question that if we frame it up, do you want to pay a property tax increase for a bond referendum, facilities bond referendum in the city, or a sales tax that other people, 60% of other folks will pay that don't live in the city? They're going to tip that way. It's kind of a natural thing. So, there's a political calculation here. Let me ponder this. I know where you're going with it, and to try to get you the best data that's actionable in the political reality that we live in this state.
It's literally why I brought it up.
Yeah.
It's really, these are big ticket items. You don't want to let the cat out of the bag. You want people to really say how they feel, but they don't necessarily know about who pay, how many residents are paying sales tax versus visitors. And, people don't really understand how bonding works necessarily, but then you have the whole political situation in St. Paul, and not to mention on the federal level. So, yeah.
If it's possible, if there can be a chance just to quickly educate people what bonding is, you'd be surprised how many people don't understand what that is.
Oh God, no.
Question.
I mean, all the years of working with school districts, we used to ask folks, back in the good old days when I started doing this in the 90s, do you know the difference between a levy and a bond? 20% could tell you levy for learning, bond for building. The other 80% had no idea. So we don't even ask it anymore. It's a waste of a question. We know people don't understand it. Go into the education part of it.
Yeah. They just have to know that it affects their property taxes. That's all. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
So,
But when you say bonding, if you would be in favor
That'd be
of
a body
bonding,
of water.
you then are they just going, what? Or do you in the question just say property taxes?
Property tax, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'll probably frame it up as a prioritization and then perhaps a preference, but let me ponder it. I know where we're going.
Thank you.
all right. Anybody else?
Could I ask just a question? We've covered the bond and the sales tax. The e-bikes, I understand that's kind of the public safety, the going too fast, that sort of thing is what we're looking at, as if how wide of a concern that is in the community, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then with two other points on the staff list, the organized garbage collection.
Yeah. So, right now in Minnetonka, people can choose their own garbage hauler. And there have been times when it's proposed to have a single garbage hauler for the whole city. And there are people who feel strongly on both sides of that.
Oh, yes.
And there are also people that feel strongly that we should go to single hauler as long as it's their hauler. So I think there were
Oh,
89%
100%.
of people who said they wanted to go, single hauler that would not give up their trash hauler.
I make the joke. It's a fair joke. I grew up in Wisconsin, so I can make fun of Minnesotans on this one. I don't understand Minnesotans' inalienable right to be able to choose their garbage hauler. It's an amazing thing here, and that's why. So I'll flesh this out for you. The support opposition for the change, but then to dig down a little bit and to understand where's it coming from. It tends, it's really interesting because when you go through the list and say, do you get better cost, better customer service? It's an equal split. Do you think street maintenance is better? Do you think pedestrian safety is better? Yes, it's better with single hauler, but it still nets out that it's more important for me to be able to choose than overcome that. So I'll kind of keep, gauge the generic support opposition, but try to drill down for you. I think I've been asking about this for 25 years, and we still don't have one city that had a majority of people support. It's gotten kind of to be more of a 40-40-20 tie, but there's a mandate hasn't happened yet. I just put it in the Mahtomedi survey, again, much to the chagrin of the city manager out there on their city survey. So, but I can include that in for you. And then the other one was just short-term rentals. I had a question on that.
Yeah, I actually had a question on that too. What is that? What would we want to ask there?
If people think it's an issue or not.
People, yeah. So I think a couple of
Gauging.
things.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of things real quick. If I can jump in. Just to back up real quick on e-bikes. Does the council want to know how many people either own or use e-bikes? In addition to, I think Peter, you talked about flushing out, are they a concern? Do we also want to know how many ownership of e-bikes?
Yeah, that's probably a reasonable question.
I think so too. I think that would be helpful to give context for results one way or the other also.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, council, on that. And then short-term rentals, staff put this on the list. This has come up with a few council members just with, I think you've heard from some residents with concerns over short-term rentals, meaning short-term rentals, defined at like the Verbos, Airbnbs, month-by-month type rental properties. I think some of you have heard from constituents with concerns in neighborhoods. So staff threw it out there if that's something you wanted to learn more about, concerns regarding short-term rentals and whether cities should enact some sort of policies regarding short-term rentals. And that's why staff threw it out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I just didn't know what was in mind.
Okay.
If you ask that question in other cities, Peter.
Not in Minnesota. No, not when we're going for short-term rentals. We've asked it about, single family homes being used for rental in neighborhoods, but not going the route of the Airbnb, VRBO, or Verbo question. So that'll be interesting.
Council, you're going to inquire about short terms?
I think originally, I think it was around short-term rentals kind of taking up housing, like affordable housing. I know in Minneapolis, it became a thing where folks were using their property to use for Airbnb, which is now taken away from affordable housing. And so I think that's where the concern had came from, just making sure that we're not using the Airbnb to take away affordable housing. So I think that's kind of, I don't know how to.
Issue for sure.
Yeah.
That definitely was one. And I think the other issue is just having.
Parties or something.
Well, people you don't know.
I mean, that's what they do.
Well,
Sort of,
yeah, someone, like, not someone renting out their house for 2 weeks out of the year or something, but somebody who buys a property and continually uses it basically like a hotel.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, so there's,
Yeah, that.
yeah.
We have some neighboring
Yeah,
cities
okay.
that have actually outlawed that, Peter. So I think Greenwood and Deep Haven may have, at least one of them, maybe both, have prohibited those. So, we're starting to get questions in my ward on that as well.
Okay.
Can I just bring up one more thing? I know we don't want to add more questions, but a thought occurred to me about chemicals on lawns and stuff. And I know I've had a lot of people talk about that. And I don't know if that's too specific or if that's something we should talk about at another survey. But, the chemicals in lawns. And I know that there's a state statute and stuff, but like how many people are worried about lawns? Because we have so much of it in Minnetonka and we're trying to support like rain gardens and stuff like that. And then on the other hand, you've got these really well manicured, huge lawns.
Turf lawns, yeah.
And I mean, but I don't know if this is just another question and maybe that's too much but it just occurred to me. And I don't know what people feel about it.
I mean, I wouldn't object to having one question about it.
Is there any way to?
Look at the concern portion, because it wouldn't be
Yeah.
like, you're not at a point of testing a policy
No.
like that.
No.
But perhaps if you've heard that the community had concerns about it, okay, yes.
Or
Building on that, Patsy, I've gotten some calls and emails about leaf blowers.
Well, I was gonna say yes, yeah, leaf blowers, yep.
Yeah, and I know,
Roller.
That's,
We did ask that
That
before.
question was about-
Yep.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
probably have it. I think it was the year before last, we asked it.
I think it was the year before last was the leaf blowers. It was kind of a hot issue there for a year or two.
Very low.
very low, people were concerned.
I had a question around.
But do you want to
Want to re-ask it?
you're re-asking the question or not? Or do you want to?
I just was thinking in the context, if we're thinking about lawns and, do you have, levels of concern? If it could be a multi-part question that builds on, pesticides using.
I think
gas.
we asked it more don't you remember, Peter, it was in the context of noise? It was more about.
Yeah, it was more noise, but we could add a couple questions around lawn care.
Okay.
I could frame that up for you to review.
I had a question about programming for youth, and I'm not for sure if we asked this question, but what type of programs is our city, our community willing to invest in for youth? Because I don't know, it's kind of sparked a interest. Jania's been taking a cooking class at Hopkins High School, and she said, you all should have a cooking program. And I was like, well, you have it at Hopkins School, you have a class there. And she said, no, I mean like in the community, like the community should have a cooking program for kids, And so it kind of sparked my interest of like, what type of programs is our community willing to do for our kids in our city? Because we have Williston, we have, the Marsh, but do we have specifically community programming for our youth? I know we have some through the community ed, but like more so for teenagers, when you hear something like that, that's what she said to me. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, but don't they teach at the school? And she was like, no, it's different. So it just made me think about that. So that was something, I don't know if it was a question asked in the survey, but do we have a community that's willing to invest in programming? Kind of like going to a Boys and Girls Club or something. I don't know how to describe it, but like taking some random cooking class or something. I don't know, but that was just my thought process.
Yeah,
I don't know. Good question. You know, because I think we do have we have youth programming. Obviously, we have programming for teens. I think both school districts, Minnetonka and Hopkins do as well. We work together to try to not overlap. Maybe there's some things we're missing. You know, there's a couple questions in here about recreation. I don't know if there's a specific question we could ask about recreation. I know there's a few that, you know, probably more about facilities. I don't know that how much we have about
Right.
programming.
Yeah, I was going to say it tends to be facility dominant, the survey itself. But perhaps just a question about, do you feel that there are enough opportunities and programs for teens in the city?
That question is exactly what we need to hear.
Okay.
That one. Because I know we have programming, but I know we tend to talk about the lack of teen programs. We talk about that more than we talk about programming. So yeah, that question is perfect.
Okay, we have 4 minutes till we start our park board interviews. So anybody else have any final?
Thanks for keeping us on track.
You betcha.
Thank you, Kimberly. Just to go back to, I think you had good notes. Thank you, council. Just one clarity yet that I have, and goes back to what Paula asked earlier, just about with our zoning code update coming up. In talking with Julie here recently, there's going to be some information in that process that needs to get vetted out, and there's a public engagement process with that, which I think would probably be the best opportunity to ask more specific zoning type questions. Julie, you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that was part of our thinking that we would actually, you know, use survey tools to get responses about certain sections of the zoning code separately. We wanted a more, I'm not interested in this specific topic and get it whole city perspective, then you probably should ask it here. So it just kind of depends on where you're headed with that thought.
Okay. That's fine. If we're going to do it through that conscience, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up because it was on our minds too, because throughout, it's 18 months of a lot of heavy work. And so we'll need there's public engagement built into that process. But again, it's not precluding us from answering questions in the community survey venue that staff would say probably the venue of using more of our Minnetonka Matters throughout that 18-month process will serve us better.
And I think too, if you think about the time frame, like you know, by the time we hit this next year, you might have something more tangible for folks. And that might be a better time, because right now you don't really have much for them to look at or respond to. So it might be a better next year consideration, but that's fair. That's our thought right now.
Okay. So are we, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope you feel better soon.
Me
and
too. Thank you.
Appreciate you joining us virtually to work on this with us.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You as well. Bye.
Okay. So we have 1 minute. So I talked to Mike. I think what we're going to do is, since there's 5 of us and 5 candidates, each one of us will ask one of the candidate all the questions.
Okay.
And so we can, whenever.
So we'll just start one end and go down or something.
Yeah, I might do the first and then go through. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
Is Jennifer here? Yes, okay. Jennifer, you can come to the center table. And you can flip this to your shirt just so we have the recording of your interview.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. And we will just go down and have council introduce ourselves, and then we will start with questions.
Hi, I'm Kizzy, Ward 4. Paula Vermeille, Ward 3.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn. I'm at large and acting mayor today.
I'm Deb Calvert. I'm also at large.
Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
Okay. So I'm I will start with the questions. So please tell us about yourself and what in your background makes you the right person for this position.
So my name is Jennifer Christie, and I think I'm the right person for this position because I've been a Minnetonka resident for over 18 years combined at 2 different residents. I actively play tennis at Williston, and I walk my dog every day at Big Willow City Park. So I'm very familiar with the facilities, both with outdoor recreation and programming. I have a Park and Rec degree from the University of Minnesota. I've been a program chair for the Minnesota Recreation and Park Association, 2 conferences in the early 2000s, and I was also the program chair for the National Park and Recreation Association, which was here in 2010. I've also worked for Three Rivers Park District since the late 80s until the early 2000s. And then I worked at the Minnesota DNR as the Park and Trail and Public Water Access Acquisition until right before COVID.
Nice. And should I ask you, do you want a water or anything?
Oh, I'm fine, thanks.
Okay.
It's 10 minutes, let's hope we don't go over time. I was gonna put myself as a watch timer, actually. How do I condense it? So that's more my challenge.
I think that's a challenge for a lot of us. Okay, so question number 2. Preservation and enhancement of city's natural environment and offering active recreational amenities are both highly regarded community values. How would you approach balancing these 2 diverse community perspectives when residents have differing views on park land use and recreation priorities?
So having worked and been a part of Three Rivers Park District, I don't believe that they're mutually exclusive. I would say the DNR as well. I was typically saying the mantra that I don't think they're mutually exclusive. That, like the Park District, they have an 80-20 policy where 80% is left to natural state and 20% is for active recreation. And so there are ways to come up with a structure that we can balance and protect both desires, because I believe our community wants both, and I am part of that community.
Okay. Question 3, the city emphasizes diversity, equity, and inclusion in our body of work. How does this effort intersect with the work of the park board?
So hot topic, as we all know nationally, I'm going to call it more. I think it goes with taking the lead from the nature, and nature's strength is diversity. And we've learned from our different practices, like, what am I thinking of?
Emerald ash borer.
Dutch
No,
elm?
I'm going older.
Dutch elm disease.
So we learned from Dutch elm disease of planting the same type of plant. And then to replace those, we maybe or maybe didn't learn about putting ashes instead. So I think the strength is in diversity, and we've learned that from nature. And I think this area and in general Minnesota is changing, and we need to change with the population and make sure that we represent people who are outdoor recreating and take it from a different perspective than one perspective that has been dominant over the last century. I'm gonna go century.
Fair. Okay, and finally, based on your understanding of the commission, what do you think will be an individual challenge for you and a challenge for the group?
So that was a tough one. In fact, I picked the brain of a coworker, former coworker who was a park board, Sue Woodrich, from a while ago. And we talked about it on our walk on the Park District's LRT trail. And I think for me, the challenge is having a lot of diverse background and bringing that perspective in, as well as listening to the voices of the citizens. And I think putting the weight of different voices and making sure that it's not just the most vocal voices, that we take multiple perspectives into consideration, weigh the pros and cons, and look at how we would benefit current and future generations. Did you ask the 2-part? Was it with the group?
Yeah, what's the challenge for the group?
So for the group, I think it's understanding what groundwork has been laid before us and what kind of twist do we want to have it for our legacy, and what kind of impacts do we want to make? So understanding what's been coming before us, what's being worked on, and then what kind of legacy or direction do we want to take it. And I like the team programming. That's a big one of mine. At the time when the kids need to figure out how to socialize and interact with people is when, no knock on the park and rec field, but maybe a little bit that we take care of the youth, we take care of the children, we take care of the at-home moms. Are we taking care of the teenagers who need it the most right now? So I'm all with you guys on it, and I'm not just saying that. It was my beef, it wasn't on my list, but you brought it up. I think we need to do more.
We have just a few minutes, so do you have a question, any questions for us?
How much does the council, the current council, take the advice or the recommendations of the park board in the past? Is that kind of loaded?
That's
a good one.
That's an interesting question. I think it depends on the topic.
Yeah.
Issue,
I mean,
yeah.
I find the feedback really important. I really listen to all the different perspectives from our advisory boards, and it's just good to, it just sort of helps us get a temperature of, these are people that are a little better informed than the average resident, but that sometimes, like us, they don't agree on everything, and it's just good to hear the rationale. I think that's what's
Right.
really important to me.
And there have been times when there's been a topic we've considered and decided that it's something that we should have the park board weigh in on. So, yeah, I would say we certainly respect the expertise and the advice that we get from the park board.
Great, I think that's important. You don't want to be on a board where it's not valued or heard.
Right. All right, well, thank you very much. You will be hearing from staff within the next few days.
In the next couple days, you'll hear from me.
Right, sounds good. I want to walk away without this.
Yeah.
Knows what I would say.
Yes, so thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Hi.
Good evening.
Welcome. You were just here. I think we can skip the introductions if that's all right
Okay,
with you. Kizzy, do you want to do the questions for this one?
Sure. Please tell us about yourself and what in your background makes you the right person for this position.
My name is Luke Van Santen. I've been a resident here in Minnetonka Ward 3 for the last 22 years. Both of my kids grew up here, and one of them is still at home with us. The other has moved on to their own apartment, yay, in Minneapolis. I have a Bachelor's of Science degree in engineering from Colorado School of Mines, way long time ago. I worked here in the area for the last 30 years, mostly for the Department of Transportation, or on larger transit projects. And over the last 8 years-ish, maybe 7, maybe 9, I've been involved a lot with volunteering in various parks, mostly Lone Lake Park, but also Meadow Park, Big Willow, a little bit at Hillaway, and a little bit at Linner Park. I'm going back to Lone Lake Park. I'm one of the dirt bosses there for the single track trail. And over time, since there's enough of us, I've kind of moved away from actually doing the dirt work, and I'm kind of the second in command, as it were, behind a master naturalist on the restoration and environmental side. So all of that time getting to know garlic mustard and buckthorn and all of the other wonderful visitors we have, I think kind of makes me appreciate the other parks we have and how beautiful they are.
Am I asking all the questions?
Yeah.
Oh. Preservation and enhancement of the city's natural environment and offering active recreational amenities are both highly regarded community values. How would you approach balancing these two diverse community perspectives when residents have differing views on park land use and recreation priorities?
My experience with Lone Lake Park and with Big Willow before Lone Lake Park, when it was being discussed for a possible single track trail, really kind of highlighted for me the amazing variety of what people think of as preservation. If you think of Lone Lake Park, for example, it wasn't all that long ago, longer than I've been here, but not that long ago, when it was a raspberry farm. And then it was abandoned and basically left to its own graces. And, you know, whatever grew there was good and wholesome. And people have really identified that as what they want to preserve. But it's really a question that I've struggled with. Are we preserving what was here first, or are we just preserving what's here now? And as I've considered it over time, that really has become my go-to, what I fall back on when people ask me about preservation. We need to keep what's here now in as good a shape as we can. And that means not just going out and cutting buckthorn or removing garlic mustard or planting climate change adaptive resistant trees. I think it also means trying to take it beyond that and, you know, maybe limiting the amount of salt we use in our yards or on our roads, or taking a more active approach to transportation, like walking and biking. Because it's going to be green for a while, and hopefully for a long while, but it's going to be changing, and it's going to be really, really tough to keep it exactly the same as now. And so I hope that I'll be able to communicate that with the people who may not quite see that, or maybe see it a little bit differently, and you know, obviously listen and take their perspectives into consideration, and just work to make sure that the preservation happens. Obviously, as a well, maybe not obviously, but as one of the proponents of the Lone Lake Park single track trail, there's a lot of things we can do in the parks and even outside of the parks that can make there be a lot more recreation or ways to increase preservation in our community. Again, going back to the active transportation, if we have better connections between parks or between destinations, like, is it easier for me to get to Lake Woods to buy my groceries, or is it easier to get here so I can bike to a city council meeting? All of those kind of things together are focusing in one way on preservation, but also on enhancements to the things we have now too.
The next question is, the city emphasized diversity, equity, and inclusion in our body of work. How does this effort intersect with the work of the park board?
I think the park board has every responsibility to make all of the parks, or at least as much of the parks as practical, accessible to everyone. If that means it's an adaptive trail, or if it means there's alternate methods for people to get there, if those people don't drive for whatever reason, the park board really needs to, in my opinion, stretch and make those kinds of things possible for everybody.
Last question. Based on your understanding of the commission, What do you think would be an individual challenge for you and a challenge for the group?
I kind of hinted at it a little bit in the second answer, and that's, I've seen a lot of different things about preservation, and I think that'll probably be the biggest challenge for me, is to work with other people who maybe have different views of what preservation is. And it's not from being unable to work with them, it's just here's where I'm starting and you're starting here. How do we come together and both, not just me see it as still being preservation and not you see it as, well, you're just running over me. How do we come together and make us both happier with it being both preservation and or enhancement. As far as the group itself, I don't know that there'll be any problems there. Everybody I've ever talked to here at the city, council, staff, really super easy to get along with, and I like to think I've had a good relationship with everybody, so I don't know if that'll be an issue with the group.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Do
thank
we
you.
have more time?
Yep, we have just a few minutes.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us?
I don't.
Okay, do anyone have any additional questions for him?
I don't think so.
You're free.
Well, yeah,
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in, and Sarissa will be in touch within a few days to let you know results.
And thank you for your work on the trails.
Thank you.
I didn't even know Dirt Boss was a thing until.
There you go.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Hello.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hopefully that works.
Yep, I think you're good. And we're just going to go down the row here and have council introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name is Kizzy Copley, Ward 4.
Well,
I'm Paula Renee, Ward 3.
hi there.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn, at large and acting mayor today.
Deb Calvert at large also.
Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
Hi there.
All right, and we are going to ask Paula to
Okay.
ask you the questions.
Okay.
Well, thanks for coming in tonight, Brad. Could you just tell us about yourself and what your background makes you the right person for this position?
Sure. So thank you for the invitation for being here tonight. My name is Brad Lehrman, and I'm a 26-year resident of the city of Minnetonka. So I don't know if that's a newbie or not, but I've been here for a long time. And my background is I grew up here in the Twin Cities. I'm a Minnesota native, grew up in St. Louis Park, went to both undergraduate and law school here in Minnesota. And I have considered myself a hardcore environmentalist and sort of community citizen scientist as well for many years, and have been very fortunate to live in this community because it's got enormous opportunities for people who are tree huggers and for people who enjoy natural space. So I recently retired. I'm an attorney. I practiced law for 43 years, working as a business lawyer, working for emerging growth companies that are technology-based. So all the companies you see on Shark Tank are my clients. Those are the kind of clients that I have. And I retired after 43 years and saw the notice about the potential to help here for the city, and said, if this is something I could align with. And when I read the mission and vision of what the Park Board does, it's very much in my wheelhouse. So I've been involved with environmental organizations as well within the community for decades, literally, including the Audubon Society, the Minnesota Council for Environmental Advocacy, Save the Boundary Waters Foundation, Cornell Institute of Ornithology. All those organizations sort of align again to my environmental interests, and I think those will all be helpful organizations sitting with the Park Board as well in collaboration. So I'm excited for the opportunity.
Thank you. Question 2 is preservation enhancement of the city's natural environment and offering active recreational amenities are both highly regarded community values. How would you approach balancing these two diverse community perspectives when residents have differing views on parkland use and recreation priorities?
This mic is failing. I think that is just an excellent question, whoever designed that. That was a great question. Because in essence, I think almost every governmental organization, whether it's a planning commission, whether it's the city council, whether it's any particular agency or court, is doing exactly that. They're balancing the scales. They're balancing the interests. And that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you make the hard decisions, and that's where leadership comes into play. So for me, it's about stakeholder input. And there's a lot of different stakeholders that are associated with that question. So it's not always the people who have the most money, and it's not always the people who have the loudest megaphone. It's everybody who has sort of a seat at the table. And so I think in that regard, trying to balance and measure all the stakeholder inputs is really what this commission has to do in order to make rational and reasonable decisions. And the objective is to make sure that you're doing that in, I think, a fair and maybe even scientific manner so that no one has their thumb on the scales. And that's when the scales really work, when you're balancing interests. So it's about stakeholder inputs and making them comprehensive and thorough.
Thank you. Next question is, the city emphasizes diversity, equity, inclusion in our body of work. How does this effort, in your opinion, intersect with the work of the park board, or should it?
So I think that's also a really good question. Obviously, DEI has been in the news in a significant way, especially in the last few weeks. I think the pendulum has shifted way too far to one side, which is inappropriate, and I'm very much still in favor of a DEI process. And it's very personal to me in the sense that I was a guardian and conservator for my sister who was Down syndrome. She died a few years ago during COVID. She was 69 years old, and I was her conservative and guardian for 40 years, and very much involved in inclusion programs for her. And it was really hard to find places that would accommodate her in terms of outdoor recreation activities, whether that's getting into a canoe at a canoe landing, whether that's finding a park that has accommodated rides for someone like that, and or whether that's a piece of blacktop in the forest where you can actually push a wheelchair. And I think the city here has done a pretty good job of those kinds of accommodations from the park board's perspective. I live just 5 minutes from here in Minnehaha Place near the creek, and there's a little area near the Civic Center Park that has maybe a quarter mile of a blacktop trail around the woods. And my wife and I call it the addendum because it's so tiny, but for someone who's in a wheelchair, it's meaningful. You're actually in nature, and you can be next to the creek, and you can be next to some old growth forest. So anything we can do to have that inclusion continue, whether it's people of limited abilities or people of different colors or opportunities, I think we got to keep doing that for outreach.
Great, thank you. Based on your understanding of the commission, what do you think will be an individual challenge for you? And also, what would be a challenge for the group, in your opinion?
So hopefully this doesn't sound too much like a punt, but I think those two challenges are the same, at least the large global ones that I view. Because in my mind, the number one global challenge in that respect is going to be climate change. And that may not seem like it's a big deal here in Minnetonka, Minnesota, in the middle of the North American continent, because we don't get tsunamis and we don't get hurricanes and we don't get earthquakes. But climate change is going to ravage this area in the next 50 years, and it's up to this community and every community to be visionary and forward-thinking in order to safeguard the resources that we have. And I think that climate change is going to be immense amount of rain that makes the creek go up by 6 feet in one night, or whether it's going to be wildfires that are grasses because there's been drought for 4 months. It's going to hit Minnetonka just like it's going to hit the rest of this planet. And so, to me, in order to preserve the beautiful green space that we have and the opportunities that we have for the citizens to have well-being with the park amenities, we need to keep our eye on that ball.
Thank you. Thanks for your answers. I think we have a few minutes left, so if you have any questions for us, this is your opportunity.
So I'd like to know how the board functions vis-a-vis its relationship with the city council. What kind of inputs and what kind of activities happen in that sort of dance?
Oh,
Go ahead.
Actually, we talked about it with another candidate also. Sometimes there are things that we want to consider, and then we decide, let's have Park Board vet it. Form some opinions around it. And I would say that one of the things that I value is not just getting an array of views, because sometimes there'll be, overwhelming consensus, but it's always the rationale. What I'm looking for in our advisory boards and commissions is why do you like it? What's your rationale for support or lack of support for any one thing? And it helps me, think about my own rationale. And so I really do, I'm always hoping that all of the commissioners, all of the board members provide feedback, because I really do, I watch the meetings, I read the notes, I read the packets, and it really does help me make more informed decisions.
Nice. Do I have time for another question? So when I was thinking about my own history, like what motivates me to be an environmentalist, how did that happen? It really sort of started when I was 14 years old. I went to the Boundary Waters for the first time with a overnight camp organization. And I absolutely fell in love with that area and have been back probably 40 times in my life. Just really special. But that came to me as a young person. And I'm wondering how much interaction there is with this commission and kids and education outreach programs, because I'm a big believer in making the kids the ambassadors to the environment.
We have one youth park board member. That's one way, so that they have input, that youth have input. And we have two youth members on Sustainability Commission.
We do. I don't know if there's
Ambassadors.
like specific programming with the youth and park board or sustainability,
But there could be.
but there could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're willing to.
Oh, so.
I would just.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Kim. I would just add to that point, we do have a youth board member on the park commission, so we do have that representation. Outside of that, it's more anecdotal, where we do have a lot of city staff members go to our school districts. So over to your left, Mr. Raymond, is Kelly O'Day is our rec manager. So between Mr. O'Day and our chief of police, Scott Warburton over there, and Will Manchester, Julie Wishnack. So a lot of our directors in the room, our teams do interact with the school district. It's not on a formal per park basis perhaps, but there might be opportunities to expand that.
And the other thing is, one of the reasons that we have a mountain bike trail is that a student group paid for a feasibility study, and then several of those students, I believe, did actually put some sweat equity into their pet project. So there's some.
I think letting kids in some level have skin in the game, for their own environment, whether it's looking for, monarch butterfly eggs, or whether it's taking a plastic bag and going out and picking up trash in the park, there's a big need for that and for them to feel invested in their future. I would really like to see that outreach.
That's good. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And you'll be hearing from Sarissa within a few days on what the outcome is.
Good, thank you.
Thanks for your time.
You have such an awesome city.
Oh, I thought you said folks were good.
Just saying.
I'm like, wow.
No, we have these great candidates. It's okay.
Oh, is he?
Oh. Hello,
Hi,
welcome, thanks for joining us.
thank you.
We're gonna go down the row and introduce ourselves.
Should put your microphone on.
Oh, yeah, can you? There you go.
Hi, I'm Kizzy Coakley from Ward 4.
I'm Paula Ramaley. I represent Ward 3.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn, I'm at large and acting mayor.
I'm Deb Calvert. I'm also at large. Good to see you.
I'm Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
All right, and we're gonna have Deb ask you our questions today.
So thanks for coming in. First question is, please tell us about yourself and what in your background makes you the right person for this position.
It's the culmination of my work as a teacher, professor, assessment specialist, and test developer. The travels I've done around the country in about 40 of the states and looking under the hood of their mathematics educational program and standards. And that, along with the time I had as a young teacher, early teacher, just graduated from college, I signed up, joined the Peace Corps, and I was quickly routed to West Africa, to Sierra Leone, where I was a teacher in K through 8 primary school in a small village up country about 300 miles from the coast. And you might say it was character building because my training program was about just shy of a week. And I had to learn the language, and English was the language of Sierra Leone, but 2 years went by like that, and students were terrific. The people don't have much materially, but they have big hearts and big ambitions. Along with that, I did public school teaching, mostly mathematics, and also post-school, post-high school teaching. I taught undergraduates in mathematics and mathematics education. I did a lot of student-teacher supervision, and I was always interested in Mother Nature. When I was 7 years old, I used to go around town where I grew up climbing trees, much to the dismay of my mother. But when I got up there, I was a small kid. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I didn't weigh anything, so I could just climb. And every time I got up 30 feet in the air, I could see around me. And to me, that felt like I owned the entire forest. And it's a feeling I never got over. That, plus all the teaching jobs I've had, and in my retirement, having the opportunity to do volunteer work for the last 6 years at the Arboretum really sealed it for me, because I got to look under the hood of how parks run. Even though the Arboretum is not a park, it's got a lot of park-like stuff. It's also not free. They charge a pretty good rate to get a membership, but the people who come there take a lot out of it. It's got so many wonderful spaces and so many educational opportunities, and I learned so much about not just the wildlife and the plants, but how things operate, and that was just excellent. And I feel like all these things are coming together with an opportunity to do something that I know a little bit about, meet some interesting people, and move on.
So, second question is, preservation and enhancement of the city's natural environment and offering active recreational amenities are both highly regarded community values. How would you approach balancing these two diverse community perspectives when residents have differing views on parkland use and recreation priorities?
If you're not, if you're not developing and improving, you're not moving forward, you're not advancing. And there's different kinds of moving forward. There's the everyday maintenance, and then there's the routine care that has to happen with the restrooms and the walkways and the safety and the infrastructure, the paving, groundskeeping, mowing, plant attendance and so forth. There's also the thinking that has to go on with, do we have the right specimens here? Do we have the right mix? Do we have the right angles for what we're trying to do with this park? Is it situated in a way that is accessible to everybody? What kinds of things can we do to make it better? I've been in Minnetonka long enough to remember the improvements that were made on Lone Lake Park with the bike trails. Had some controversy to it. But in the end, I don't know how many of you remember it, but in the end, the whole thing got settled rather peacefully with a lot of discussion, and the bike trails went in. Many people were happy, many people were not happy, but over the years they've coexisted, and as far as I can tell, I live near Lone Lake Park. It's been reasonably successful. I've also done a lot of work with Friends of Minnetonka Parks in working with invasives. That's another one of the things that has to happen with improvements, is looking out for all the invasives and understanding the difference between invasives and non-natives. And all that stuff has to come into play when you're doing planning and operational care and paying the bills and keeping the restrooms clean and so forth.
Thank you. The city emphasizes diversity, equity, and inclusion in our body of work. How does this effort intersect with the work of the park board?
Diversity is the touchstone of evolutionary progress. And the more diversity we can muster, diversity in the wild world is not only necessary, it's vital. Just to take a small example, the number of insects, or the number of species of insects that are known is about 900,000. Scientists figure there's probably another 100,000 that have yet to be discovered. There's 14,000 species of ferns, 28,000 species of orchids. These are successful because of the evolutionary processes that's going on too. And humans, at least H. sapiens, who we all are, coexist as one species. So you got to think about that in terms of not only what we do tomorrow, but what's the long-term effect of having many different voices, many different opinions, many different sides to the argument. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Based on your understanding of the commission, what do you think will be an individual challenge for you and a challenge for the whole group?
For me, it's going to be hearing. And yeah, I wear hearing aids, and I have a hearing loss, and I've had a progressive hearing loss, and my hearing today is not as good as it was a year and a half ago. But I'm keeping up with it. The problem I have is one that's both cognitive and emotional, and that is when I'm home with my wife Liz, and sometimes she gets a little tired of my not hearing, particularly when I don't have these in my ears, and I get scolded, rightfully so. But sometimes it comes to the point where I have to, I won't say pretend that I heard her, but I have to answer in a way that kind of hedges the question about, what did you say? Because sometimes Liz gets tired of me saying, I didn't hear that. Oh, okay. And sometimes I feel bad because I can't hear. But I can hear enough to get along, and as long as I keep an even emotional keel, I think I can stay on track.
So for the whole group?
Pardon me?
So so that's your individual challenge. Do you have a challenge you anticipate for the park board?
I would say, looking at the invasive species that we have a little more intensely, because we've got some serious issues going on right now with buckthorn and garlic mustard and a few others that are out there. And I think it's going to take some resources. If you go into some of the buckthorn areas, you're going to find some of the plants are this thick. And buckthorn spreads mostly because birds like the seeds, and it's hard to control. I've done a lot of work stints with Friends of Minnetonka Parks in Lone Lake Park, and we've made a difference there, but it's a constant battle. And the question becomes, do you want to make a constant battle? Do you want to use pesticides? I don't like using Roundup. I don't like getting it on my hands. And nobody else does either. So we have to find ways to do it as effectively as we can, but we have to be aware of what it costs. And what it costs is a lot. And I remember looking at some numbers and damage figures about what invasive costs overall, just in Minnesota, and it's a staggering number. Yes.
Great.
Do we have time?
No. It's over. So thank you for coming in and talking to us. Sarissa will be in touch with you in the next few days to let you know what the decisions were. So.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I wear hearing aids too. So I got mine in. So,
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everybody's holding up their hearing aids.
I just got new ones on Friday, and they're like, yes! I can hear so much. They are so amazing. They get better every time. It's like, it's. It's like bionic ears.
I know, I
This
want
is a
some.
hard one. I usually can like mail it out
But I would
quickly.
imagine,
Yeah.
but this is loud too sometimes, you know?
They have comfort settings.
Hi. Welcome.
Thank you.
So.
Get my mic on for you.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get that clipped on, and we're just going to go down the row here and have the council introduce ourselves.
Hi, my name is Kizzy Coakley. I'm in Ward 4.
I'm Paula Vermeille. I present Ward 3.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn. I'm at large and acting mayor today.
I'm Deb Calvert. I'm also at large.
Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
And we're going to have Patsy ask you questions today.
So please tell us about yourself and what in your background makes you the right person for this position.
All right, well, my name is Caleb Schultz, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I've been looking for ways thoughtfully to be more engaged in the work that this city is doing. I believe the fun stuff happens locally, and that's where I've always enjoyed being involved with volunteering. And I am a physician and a public health advocate, and I think of the park board as really fundamental to creating opportunities for people to be healthy in our community. And the ways in which we can make that more available, more accessible, the better, because that makes our residents and those folks who visit more healthy or have opportunities to be healthy, which is really the foundation of a healthy community. And I kind of look at the other advocacy I've done, as well as working on being a member of the park board, as from a lens of health in all policies. So what can we do to assist you as park board members to see what we're trying to enact in that lens. I have a fair amount of experience in community engagement and involvement. Prior to moving to Minnetonka, I was a commissioner of health, or part of the health commission rather, in Edina. And there I launched the Tobacco 21 movement. So I introduced the policy to other commissioners, got their input and buy-in, and then presented it to the city council and mayor, and supported them through the process of getting community input, engaging grassroots leaders to bring to fruition Edina being the first city in the state to pass the Tobacco 21 policy. 6 months later, I moved to Minnetonka, and I did the same thing here. And was asked by Minnesotans for a Smoke-Free Generation, of which I'm a coalition member, to keep moving around the state to get it passed more and more places. I said, no, Minnetonka is my long-term home. I also am part of Tonka Cares with the mayor, which is a dependency or addiction-related service entity for the school district, where we try to support kids who have these issues. And recently I finished service as a facilities task force member for the school district, and I'm also on the Minnesota Medical Association Board of Directors. So I have a long history of trying to be engaged and be involved, and I see that as part of this. I'm also an avid user of parks, both as on my own, but I have 3 school-age children who are in the Minnetonka Public Schools, and we go to our local Wilson Park with significant frequency, and other places as well.
Thank you. Preservation and enhancement of the city's natural environment and offering active recreational amenities are both highly regarded community values. How would you approach balancing these two diverse community perspectives when residents have differing views on parkland use and recreation priorities?
Well, you know, I've kind of followed this issue, these ideas that can sometimes be at odds, and you know, one of them was the Lone Lake and the mountain biking and the bee concern, and so I followed that, and I followed just recently the park and kind of leash discussions, and they're difficult. But what I see, and I think I would utilize as well moving forward, was, you know, community input, consensus building. People ultimately want to be heard, even if a decision isn't finally in their favor. People need to be heard. They need to feel like their voice is valued, what they value is valued. But I'd also take it from the standpoint of what's rhetoric and what's fact-based, what's evidence-based concerns. Because we can oftentimes get caught up in emotion that doesn't always reflect either good policy or good evidence that backs up a decision for the park board. I also think, you know, this is a city commission, and we serve residents, and so you know, I'd be thinking as well about how many people are served by which decision, and in some respects, the majority rules. So the people who might have the most benefit is also something to weigh.
Okay, thank you. The city emphasizes diversity, equity, and inclusion in our body of work. How does this effort intersect with the work of the park board?
Well, the park board, I think, has a major potential, both issue as well as opportunity. And that's in the area of disability and ableism. And I'm a person who has lived experience in the disability community Most people don't know that about me because my disability is not visible to most people. But I've experienced ableism in my workplace frequently. I experience ableism in social interactions. And so I am very sensitive to that area in relation to the park board, because to be inclusive, we have to figure out and think about how do our parks and our rec options not further ableism. And so that's something I think is very critical. In one of the organizations I've been a part of, we also do, whenever we're making a decision or making a recommendation, we do an equity timeout. So we pause before we make a final vote on something and say, what are the equity implications of this recommendation or vote? And that reminds us. It's a stop sign before we move forward. And then I'm so thankful that this city has a DEI commission, and so I would utilize that commission for recommendations if the park board members are at all concerned about DEI issues as it relates to an issue we've been tasked with.
And finally, based on your understanding of the commission, what do you think will be an individual challenge for you and a challenge for the group?
Well, for me, I think it would be simply just that I would be a brand new member to the park board. So there are aspects of kind of technical components and ordinance language that I would have to ramp up on. I fully expect to feel a little bit like I'm drinking from a water hose as I begin. But I'll take it on and I'll do the work to be productive in those ways. And I also feel like, from again that perspective, in city government, a lot of times you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've got other great examples out there, and so I think some of the learning that I'll be able to do as an individual is what are best practices or great practices, or a kind of health and all policies park board practices that I can learn about and then share with my other park board teammates. And then as a group, as you asked, I would say the biggest thing, of course, is building consensus and making sure everyone is heard. Sometimes, within group dynamics and when you put leaders in a room, well, in some cases you can end up talking over one another instead of listening, but in some cases, some of the most important voices can actually be quieted instead of brought out. So I would want our group to work hard to make sure everyone's being heard, getting their input fully fleshed out.
Do we have time for?
Well, we started a little late, so like maybe one question quickly.
Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I think the question I've been thinking about is, city councils work in multi-year outlooks. And I'm curious if any of you have a major goal for the park board that, say, might be a 5 or 10 year outlook goal that would require then the park board to spend lots of time or advanced time kind of thinking about and working on.
Well, I would say just as much as like we just passed our climate action and adaptation plan. There's the post plan. So like there's a lot of different plans in place for the city. So I think the park board would kind of would want to fall in line with those plans. I haven't specifically like personally sat down and thought about what I want the park board to be doing for the next 5 years, but I would like them to.
Because it's in the plan.
It's in the plan, yeah.
It's in the plan.
Parks, open space and
Yeah.
trails plans, the post plan
Yep.
will be guiding that work.
Yep.
And then we have the whole dog leash thing, which will also guide, that'll be a big undertaking that will affect our parks too. But did you?
I was gonna say, personally, I'm always thinking about more programming in parks for teens, youth, that's always on the forefront, so.
Yeah.
I always go back to Powderhorn Park when I was a little kid, so
Yep.
I just love that park, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
And Sarissa will be in touch in the next few days to let you know what the decision was.
All right.
So.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So you have your sheets, you can give those to me now, or you can give them to Miranda after the meeting. Or if you need more time to think about it, you can give it to me by email on Wednesday. And these appointments will be made on Monday at the council meeting, or for approval, they'll be brought forward to you.
So you want them by tomorrow morning,
I think I said Wednesday.
Wednesday?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think about this.
Well, I can't give them to you now because there's nothing on it, but.
Mike, do you have anything to add?
This is hard, I never get stumped on stuff, but this today, I'm stumped. This is really difficult.
All right.
But in Austin City, we've got good
Oh my
candidates.
God.
Embarrassment of riches.
Huh?
An embarrassment of riches.
It is, it just
If people
makes me
want,
smile.
These folks are
we'll wait
amazing.
for,
I'm just like, wow.
for Patsy to come back, so if people want to take a few minutes now and fill out their thing, if they know, I have no idea.
I'm gonna
I liked everyone. So,
I
yeah,
can
let's just
control
take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and power through.
Yeah, hit pause. Is it going?
Oh.
Okay. We are gonna turn it over now to Chief Forboon to talk to us about e-bikes.
All right.
Jump in, Scott?
Yeah, you would. You good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Wake up.
I thought I had it on. Hold on.
Oh, he's ready to go.
Okay, all right, we're ready. So good evening, everyone. We're here to talk about e-bikes. And so what I did was, I learned a lot about e-bikes last week, I'll be honest with you. There is so much to learn. I wanted to give this to somebody else, and I thought, no, I'm too far into it. And then Monday I had to refresh myself again, because there's a lot. And so my intent is to cover e-bikes specifically, but I'm also going to touch on a couple other devices that are out there that you probably have heard of. And for the most part, those are all regulated already in state statute. And so, the areas that we're going to talk about are areas that you have authority to regulate. And so, but I did want to start with what they're not. And by definition, the League of Minnesota did a really good job of putting out some information with all the different types of things that we'll see on our roadways, all the way to snowmobiles, ATVs, and things like that. But I think it's important to highlight, because you may come across these. In fact, I actually tested our officers on some of these definitions, and I'm ashamed to say that they don't know what everything out there is either. And that's going to be kind of the theme, is whatever we decide, it's always difficult, like what's coming next, and then how do we enforce it. So, but just a couple examples, like a motorized bicycle. We're going to talk about e-bikes, but motorized bicycles are also fairly common, and most people think of them as mopeds.
Oh, okay.
And so how I look at a motorized bicycle, it typically doesn't have the pedals, is one factor, not all the time, but the biggest factor is they're either powered by electric or a gas engine that's 50 cc's or less. And there's some other requirements, headlight, taillight, things like that. They can't travel more than 30 miles an hour. They are similar to more like we think about lighting requirements like a motorcycle. And this is where it's really confusing is there's a different requirement for safety gear. Like for operating a moped, you need to wear, anybody under the age of 18 has to wear a helmet. So kind of keep that in mind. And then also you need like a moped permit. And so that's kind of talking a little bit about motorized bicycle. They are not e-bikes. A second one, and they're kind of categorized together, segways and hoverboards. Those devices, what I would say about those two devices is they consider them an extension of a pedestrian. So if you're operating a Segway or a hoverboard, anything that a pedestrian can do, they can do. There's really no other requirements for those type of devices. And again, there's others. These things change by the year. There's these little pocket bikes, like motorcycles, or like a little mini motorcycle, but those are all considered motorcycles. They're gas powered, but they look very small. And you know, who's riding it? You look quite large. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of these things. But these are already covered in state law. So if we have a moped on a sidewalk, it's in violation because they should be on the roadway. Things like that. Again, segways and hoverboards, they could operate on our trails, and there's really nothing we can do about it. All right. But mopeds, you have to be on the road on the furthest right. So, what are e-bikes? They are also known. They're called electric bikes, known as e-bikes or pedal assist bicycles. They're human-powered bicycles created with integrated electric motors, and they're capped at 750 watts. The bike motor provides additional power and speed to a cyclist, and then the drive system consists of a motor, battery, drivetrain, and throttle. There are 3 classes of e-bikes. You have class 1 is it's probably one that it's more. It goes up to 20 miles an hour. It's pedal assist only, so the motor activates only when pedaling. A class 2 is a throttle on demand. No pedaling required, but it has a maximum speed of 20. And the third is a pedal assist only. Motor activates when pedaling with a maximum speed of 28. And then I'm actually going to go over, I didn't mention this, but I'm going to go over some state and local regulations, what are already some requirements, what are some safety considerations, and then really where as you, the council, have authority to regulate the e-bikes in any way. And then just to highlight, the e-bikes are limited at 750 watts, and there's a sticker on the e-bike. So those that have e-bikes, I haven't seen this, but there must be a little sticker that tells you if you have a class. There, have someone. Yep. And so I also found a very kind of cute video that does a much better job of talking about. So it's really short. I will show it though. It actually is like about a 2.5-minute video on the difference between the 3 classes.
Hi, I'm Nicole and this is Jason. We're charged up about e-bikes. We ride them, sell them, and really enjoy them.
And we're here to tell you some of the basics of e-bikes.
E-bikes are similar to regular bikes, but with a boost. E-bike sales are doubling every year, which helps support local economies with jobs and tax revenue. And of course, there's more e-bike use on roads and trails.
Okay, so we hope this video sheds some light on what e-bikes are and who's buying them and riding them, and how they enhance the rider's experience.
From parents riding e-cargo bikes to cart kids and groceries around town instead of driving,
to recreational pedalers and mountain bikers looking to add some fun and distance to their weekend rides.
to seniors and folks with different abilities who need a little extra help to enjoy their favorite rides,
to commuters who want to skip the traffic jams, parking hassles, and still get to work feeling fresh.
So let's look at the 3 different classes of e-bikes.
Much like the different classes of cars and drivers, the 3-class system for e-bikes aligns everyone from city planners to manufacturers around a common understanding.
This 3-class system for categorizing e-bikes has been adopted in many state vehicle codes and even in state and local park regulations. Class 1 is a pedal assist e-bike with a top motor assisted speed of 20 miles an hour when the motor stops helping you.
Class 2 is the same as a Class 1, but with a throttle assist and a top motor assisted speed of 20 miles an hour also.
Class 3 is a pedal assist e-bike with a top motor assisted speed of 28 miles an hour.
In many states, Class 1 and 2 are allowed to ride wherever a traditional bike goes. Class 3 is generally allowed on the street due to their higher top speed.
In the U.S., e-bikes are required to display a label showing their class, top assisted speed, and wattage, so it's easy to see which class of bike you're looking at.
That's for state vehicle codes, which deal with roads and bike paths. On natural single-track trails, laws and regulations vary. Go to peopleforbikes.org/e-bikes to learn more about e-bike movement and how more and more jurisdictions are adopting this harmonized 3-class system.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't tried an e-bike yet, what are you waiting for?
For real.
I can hook you up for less.
Okay, that was a nice way of kind of an overview, better than just reading from a slide deck. And so, as we look at what our current state and local regulations around any e-bike use is that operators must be at least 15 years old. E-bikes cannot carry more passengers than designed, I guess. E-bikes are allowed on most bicycle trails through local restrictions may apply. And really the focus will be on the class 3 on beyond. So really on class 1 and 2, there's very little you can do to regulate their use on a trail system, bike path and something like that. Really the only thing that you could do across the board would be, think about this, would be a helmet requirement, because again, they're not required to wear helmets to operate e-bikes. And so local authorities can impose additional rules for e-bike uses on trails and paths under their jurisdiction. That's what we're here to talk about. First one is really when we think about non-motorized designated trails with a natural surface. We have what we would consider the mountain bike trail. It's not something that we're really looking at to highlight tonight. So I think we'll look more closely at the level 3s. What's interesting is local authorities can prohibit the operation of a class 3 e-bike with the motor engaged on a bicycle path. And so my question to Julie was, would you ever operate a class 3 without the motor engaged? And it's my understanding that they're pretty heavy. And so as a local authority, you can prohibit the use of a class 3 bike on a trail or a bike path, but the motor, you have to know if the motor's engaged or not, which I could tell you would be very difficult, right? I wouldn't know that. So just for practical purposes, that's your authority. You can only regulate it by saying the motor can't be engaged. So in theory, you could say you can ride a class 3 on a bike path. You'd have to regulate whether the motor's engaged or not. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. And so the other thing is that you can prohibit, that's consistent with the safety and general welfare of bikeway, roadway, or shoulder users, or terms of a property conveyance. It's my understanding there are situations where someone may allow a trail to come through their property, and so there might be some conditions of that usage. We're not as familiar with that in our city. We can certainly look at it closer, but from talking to Kareen, there could be those issues, but again, our focus is more on the class 3. These are just some more at the state and federal level. This is what's happening on trails that are under the DNR. Is class 1 and 2 e-bikes are allowed. Class 3 regulations under review. And this is what you'll see with many jurisdictions is the class 3 e-bike are relatively, they're newer, and so many jurisdictions haven't really taken a stance on the class 3. On local and federal trails, again, it's really up to the local governments. And some safety requirements that is across the board is you have to be 15 years old. You do not need registration, licensing, or insurance is not required. And modifying e-bikes to exceed speed limits is prohibited. So you can't manipulate the e-bike to make it go faster than like 28 miles an hour, for example. Some safety considerations are that, class 3 e-bikes, they go up to 28 miles an hour. That's pretty fast, right? And so riders should practice handling and braking at higher speeds. They have lithium-ion batteries, and so we consistently hear about making sure that they're They're designed and they're approved batteries. You handle them carefully, dispose of them carefully. And then obviously consideration is we want to make sure riders wear protective gear and any other, and helmets. Some benefits of e-bikes is accessibility for diverse groups such as older adults or individuals with limited physical fitness. There's a variety of environmental benefits, health and mental well-being, faster and more convenient commuting, and then quiet operation and ability to carry cargo. And I'm sure there's many, many more. Those are just some things that I had found in the research. Looking at neighboring cities, and so I had reached out to most of the neighbors that touch our border, because one of the concerns I had is consistency. So when people travel on our bike trails, or as they move from city to city, it's very difficult if one city has a different regulation. You wouldn't know that, or there have to be some posting, and it could make it difficult for those that are navigating our trails. Edina is considering, it hasn't been adopted yet, requiring helmets for riders under 18, and they are also looking at prohibiting Class 3 e-bikes with motors engaged. Again, they haven't adopted anything. Those are just two of the areas that they're looking at. They also may be looking at a speed limit requirement on trails by maybe keeping it at 20 or something like that. I haven't confirmed that, but someone had mentioned they may include speed as well. You can see St. Louis Park, Plymouth, Eden Prairie, Hopkins and Three Rivers have no current restrictions or any regulations on e-bike use. Maple Grove refers to the statute which covers bicycles. So what they're saying is pretty much anything a bicycle can do, an e-bike can do. And then to our west, you have Shorewood, Greenwood, and Excelsior. They all have adopted some regulation. For the most part, Shorewood, and when they talk about the helmet one is pretty consistent. I do see helmet under the age of 18, because remember there's no requirement. So I do see city, local government requiring those that are 16, 17, or 15, 16, and 17 to wear a helmet. The other one in Shorewood, it did include a provision that prohibits e-bikes from on natural artificial turf, playfield, playground. You can read that. That's where kind of like the unimproved surface. So I'm assuming it's so they don't damage some of that surface. And then Greenwood, I read this from their ordinance, and I'm not sure how they did this, but they do require the helmet, and they also shall not operate upon a sidewalk at any time an e-bike. So it looks like to me that they prohibit all e-bikes from operating in any part of their city except for the roadway. And then Excelsior requires a helmet. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions about some of our neighbors?
Is Greenwood, do you think it's all e-bikes or Class 3?
The way I read the resolution, it was all e-bikes.
Is Greenwood, like, to me, when it says sidewalk, I'm thinking of like an actual sidewalk, which we don't have a lot of in Minnetonka.
Correct.
But are they excluding e-bikes from trails too?
It could be that they only have sidewalks and maybe they don't have trails. I just took this from the resolution.
Got it.
And I'm sure there was a lot more that was discussed in the decision. That's the exact wording from the resolution.
Does anyone know, I thought that St. Louis Park banned bikes on sidewalks. Does anyone know?
I don't think they can do that.
You can't?
It's very clear to me that the state, the authority really prohibits, I think, bicycles and really the Class 1 and 2. They don't want local government to really restrict access. And I don't think bicycles could be, I don't think it could be.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I've been trying to think about is we see it. I don't think we complain about it. I'm just wondering, like, how many conflicts or accidents or complaints,
Oh, I have more. I'll cover
Okay,
that.
so we're getting
This was
to
just-
that.
I just didn't know if you had
Alright.
any questions
About
about like
these?
the
Okay.
regulations.
Yeah.
Keep going.
No.
So complaints and community concerns. So we actually looked at our data. Now again, it's sometimes can be difficult mining our data, but last year it looks like we found specifically 12 complaints regarding e-bike use. So not a great deal. Most of those complaints were in neighborhoods, on streets, with kids doing wheelies, running red lights. Nothing even on our trails. Now, we've heard of issues with trails where, you know, people come up pretty fast and do that. But as far as complaints that we received, most of it, again, was on streets, cul-de-sacs, on the road, involving, you know, juveniles. We did work with Minnetonka Middle School East. They had, last year, they had a group that would ride their e-bikes to school, and they'd either store them along the fence on the trail, or they'd ride them across the ball field. We were able to work with the school directly, and it was an education. So that was handled immediately. And so that was resolved fairly quickly. And when I reached out to Public Works and their staff to see have they experienced any complaints, they do occasionally don't come to us, and they go to Public Works. And they said, yeah, we do occasionally get some complaints very similar to what you have. But then they also touched on motorized foot scooters. So I'm like, what is a motorized foot scooter? We're here to talk about e-bikes, but I discovered that motorized foot scooters are defined differently, and you also have some authority. And so I decided to weave that into this presentation.
Oh, boy.
So you wouldn't have to come back. So this is what a motorized foot scooter is, and you can read the definition there, but I've seen these out and about, fairly common, but they must not operate on a sidewalk. That's already in state law.
So that's in state law, but aren't these like what they have in cities?
Yeah, you can
where
rent them,
people
like the line.
break their ankles every
and then-
5 minutes, yeah. Okay.
That's what is most challenging
lines.
about some of these is that now you can see also, you must be at least 18, at least 12 years old to ride, and you must wear a helmet under the age of 18. So what's really difficult is the state has they have some state laws, and depending on like I talked about e-bikes, you don't have to wear a helmet, but on these you have to wear a helmet. Now where local government has the ability to regulate it, again, a city can prohibit these scooters on a bike path, lane trail, or bikeway designated for non-motorized use. And that's pretty much any of our trails. And so I added this because I thought it'd be something you may want to consider. I don't have any knowledge of any significant complaints involving these, but it just is another option for you as you start to look at regulating e-bikes in one way. Do you also want to look at the use of motorized foot scooters?
That seems crazy.
What's that?
I said that seems crazy, like totally inconsistent.
It's very difficult,
Right,
and
yeah,
then
it
there's
doesn't
other
make
types
sense.
of devices that the ages are different.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, regardless, is that the most important part of this is education and outreach. Whatever's decided, there are opportunities to work with our schools, with really teaching, families and kids what they can and can't do. Working with our retailers, can we put flyers out really describing what these devices are, how dangerous they are. I think regardless of the decision, I think there could be more done around education and outreach. And it worked very well at Minnetonka Middle School without creating a lot of extra stuff. We really just focused on the problem and had a solution. And so this, I think, is important regardless. And then if there's any desire to put any signage on the trails and any other opportunities. And so I think that is something I would want to highlight. And that really is kind of the short and sweet of it. There's again, the areas that you have the ability to regulate are if you want to require helmets, or do you want to regulate Class 3 on the bike paths or trails with no motor engaged. And then there's a couple with looking at, I also included the natural surface. So you saw that one of the cities included like natural turf, ball fields and things like that. So there is some ability to create some regulation around not operating any e-bike on those type of surfaces.
Okay.
So I'll turn over to you, Acting Mayor.
All right. So as someone who owns several bikes, including an e-bike that I've had for a couple of years, and my husband rides an e-bike, just some thoughts. So one, I have a Class 2 e-bike that I could change some settings on it to make it a Class 3. I've never done that because 20 miles an hour is fast enough, and it's not allowed on some trails, so I just leave it a Class 2 as Class 2. A lot of you have seen my bike. It's like a cargo type bike. It weighs 70 pounds, and the few times that I have forgotten to turn on assist, and I have regretted it greatly because I got an e-bike because of my knees, and that trying to push 70 pounds with no assist is dead. So I think requiring like someone to ride their e-bike with no assist on a trail, it's not going to happen. People are just going to not follow that rule. So I would be open, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with putting a speed limit 20 miles an hour or less on trails. And the same with helmets. I think like both of those things are maybe something we should talk to our legislators about, and because I think
to make it more consistent.
Yeah, a state rule would be better, I think, than especially for like a helmet. Like I can ride through St. Louis Park without one, and then I have to put one on when I cross the border. You know, it gets a little tricky. And the other thing is like, so my husband has encountered hostility while riding his bike, like just riding his bike, minding his own business. Some woman cussed at him and told him that he wasn't allowed on the bike trail, which not true.
Because it's an electric bike.
Because it's an e-bike. But he wasn't going fast, or, you know, it was just, she was, just didn't. And I have seen, you know, cyclists on regular bikes going faster than 20 miles an hour and causing problems. And I have seen plenty of pedestrians and people with dogs that are not following etiquette as well. So I think, like you said, the education is like a really big part of dealing with this issue.
And we had reached out to Commissioner Edelson's office, and there is a desire to do a county-wide approach at a minimum. That way we have consistency in our county. Similar to curfew, we all don't have separate curfew hours. And so that's still to be determined. But I do think there are other cities waiting to see what could come of the county stepping in and creating a county-wide ordinance that's consistent. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it could.
Okay. Did you get any sort of feeling as to like timing from the county? No?
I did not.
This isn't necessarily for staff, and I'm almost wondering, because you have an e-bike, like, do you think e-bikes on the mountain bike trail would cause more erosion, for instance, or be a little more dangerous than just a pedal-powered mountain bike?
I think like potentially, again, I don't know like numbers wise how many people are e-bike mountain biking. I don't know if that's like.
Well, the park board did talk about that when the mountain bike trail came on, and there's not that much research about that. And so the park board erred on the side of accessibility and allowing them on our mountain bike trails and seeing what was going to happen. And we haven't seen significant damage due to e-bikes out there.
And my other question is, do you think that the small number of complaints is because there isn't, it's becoming an adopted device, but it's not, you know, they're not widely, not a lot of people have them yet?
I think that could be part of it, like anything else, once it becomes more normal.
It's kind of a novelty right now, and it's not, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're going to have, you know, people who will follow rules. So like if we institute rules, the rule followers will follow, and there'll be people who ignore them. and there's always gonna be some people who don't do the right thing. So like whether they're on a regular bike or an e-bike or whatever, who, you know, don't signal when they're passing, pass too close, ride on the wrong side, whatever it is. I think it's just the e-bikes can potentially be more dangerous because of higher speeds, and higher weight. But I don't know that like there's a huge number of e-bike riders that are like misbehaving, for lack of a better word.
I just know, like, when I go to Carver Park Reserve, the e-bikers are incredibly obnoxious. They're going really fast, and, you know, everybody else is just supposed to get out of the way. And, I mean, it makes it, you know, it's a beautiful park, and it's hard to enjoy sometimes. But, you know, my whole thing is, what I've been trying to balance with this is that accessibility piece, making sure that, I mean, the whole thing is making sure that people can get out in nature or at least fresh air, get some exercise, especially if they have any kind of, you know, physical limitation, even if it's not a permanent disability, just like knee problems or whatever the case may be. And just making sure that we can keep people healthy and outdoors, and making our spaces accessible to people, and also achieving our greenhouse gas.
Right, yeah, I was
you know,
gonna bring
and
up
really
the first mile, last mile
exactly
thing that we're trying to.
But also being mindful of safety, and also the enjoyment of people who are on foot or are on slower vehicles. And now I'm thinking about those the motorized scooters.
Yeah, I haven't seen those on the trails, but I have seen. So I have the
hoverboards I've seen.
No, the tiny motorcycles.
Yeah,
And
those cannot be, those are already regulated by state law.
Right, yeah, they're already not allowed, but that's like
Correct.
I had somebody zip by me, and they do look ridiculous because it was like a like a 20-year-old man with his knees up here. They went zipping by, but
I think the easiest way, if it doesn't have a pedal, it probably should not be on the
Right,
trail.
yeah,
They usually have a peg.
he
and
had
it's
pegs.
motorized.
There was no pedaling happening. It shouldn't have been on the trail, but I wasn't going to stop him. So.
Oh my God, that's too funny. I also just wonder, Mike and I talked about this a little bit, is just, you know, enforceability. By the time, I mean, it's almost anything we do except for maybe a helmet is unenforceable. You can see if someone's, you know, wearing a helmet or not.
Right.
But if somebody's going over 28 miles an hour, I mean, are we going to have our officers on the trails with a, you know, radar gun, or, you know?
It would be a challenge.
Yes.
You would rely on just compliance, and, you know, and again, to your point, people that will already comply are probably driving or riding in a safe manner, you know, but it does make it challenging. You know, we do have a bike patrol unit that patrols our trails, and so regardless of what is decided, I think there's such a new, they're still new, and I think there could be a fairly significant campaign program with their bike patrol getting out there in the main. You see it along Nantucket Boulevard. You could do a lot with that signage, some stuff like that. So, but speed limits enforcement would be difficult, and it would be almost impossible to know if your motor's engaged or not, from my understanding.
The only thing that I think about is that if something bad happened, and now I'm starting to think about it because the Baker Road Trail is going to be going in the next 2 years, and we just had a meeting at Hopkins West Middle School, and it's just another conflict zone. So now, you know, I mean, I would love it if more kids would be riding their bike to school instead of, you know, having mom and dad drop them off and making all the traffic on Baker Road. But it's just another point of conflict, and just making, if we have the regulations and somebody's not doing it and something happens, you know, but I kept thinking, how do we enforce almost anything, honestly?
Right, well, yeah, I mean, I think if we pass the regulations, the people that follow rules will follow the rules.
Yeah.
It's like,
and
isn't it like so many other things? We have lots of complaint-based, ordinances. Just another couple of quick comments. I understand the lack of enforceability or the ability to do that. I will say that I've gotten a number of comments from residents about, stopping using the trails with their small children.
Yeah.
Because of concerns about e-bikes specifically and, just speeds. The other thing, and I have no idea if this is all feasible, but, with Panaway, what they have done in Wayzata, of course, is you have a bike path and you have a pedestrian path.
Mhm.
And, that's going to be added expense, but that's, one way to consider dealing with it in the future if it becomes an issue. But, I don't know that this is going to go away, and maybe we wait and see. But I really feel for those families.
This feels sort of like a wait and see to me, just because it's becoming an issue, but it's relatively minor right now. But I anticipate it becoming an issue, and I to my point about I love going to Carver Park Reserve, but the e-bikers have sort of taken it over, and it is like I would be scared to have a kid, and I'm always pulling my dogs in. I try to follow etiquette, but I mean, you literally have to get all the way off. It's just like these big groups of e-bikers just zooming by, and it kind of takes away the.
Who aren't even pedaling usually.
Huh?
Who often aren't pedaling.
So how can we move forward? with
Yeah,
this
I would
tonight?
say, like, I agree, it's a wait and see thing, except for maybe doing the education piece, and I guess the chief can tell us.
What about
Like,
helmets?
Do you have capacity to do some, like,
Yeah,
community?
I think this is the time as we get into the spring and summer to work with our schools. We can get into our parks, do some stuff, get our bike patrol out there, hand out flyers. We have the ability to do that, correct? Yep.
What about helmets? That's the other thing is these are actually relatively
Yeah.
breakable.
Yeah, I mean, I have no objection to requiring helmets for under 18.
It's under 18, correct.
Again, it falls under the enforceability thing, but at least you can see if someone has a helmet on their head. But.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the class 3, to me, like, I don't think we should have that on our trails at all, whether it's the motor is engaged or not, because, like, you can't tell. So I just think having a class 3 on the trails, you should just restrict the whole deal.
I don't think we can.
I don't
Is
know.
that right?
Class 3
you can prohibit the motor
when it's
engaged.
You
Oh,
can't
right, you
prohibit
can't
it from
con-
the trail.
You can't, yeah.
You can't like say.
Right, Corinne? That's how we read it?
Oh, so only if it's engaged.
Which is
Only if
They
it's
can have it on the
engaged.
trail.
So you can't tell or not.
So you can't,
so.
I mean, you can by the way they're pedaling, in all honesty, but no, you can't tell. And like if someone just riding by, you can't tell if it's a class 2 or class 3.
Right.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's do the helmets and then the education piece. And,
See where it goes.
and see where it goes. Because we could litigate this all night long, but we need to, does that sound good? Or?
Yeah, I guess the question, we would have to come back with helmets only, and then if there's additional throughout this, as we learn, bring it back again?
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
What about the Hennepin
So-
County thing though?
That sounds good to
I
me,
think
the Hennepin
we could-
County thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we
My
don't know. we don't
impression
know.
is, I think helmets, I think you could, there's a public safety need with helmets with keeping people's heads intact. And there's other similar devices that already require a helmet.
Yeah.
So I think at a minimum, you're gonna see that pretty consistent. It's where it gets a little, it's these other areas here. So that sounds like it's workable. I just didn't know about timing, I would assume we'd have to come back with the helmets, and then if there's any change, we'd have to come back again.
Yeah, thank you. Kimberly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Some thoughts as I'm listening to the conversation. So I hear what you're saying is helmets, helmets and education. I think timing is an important question. Maybe something to also think about in addition is, earlier tonight we talked about the survey questions. And so do you want to have survey data before you make a decision even on helmets? Because on a survey, we'll be asking about how many people own an e-bike and what concerns, however that's framed up, concerns about e-bikes. Will that be information you would want?
I'd be curious.
Before you do an ordinance?
I think so.
Could he ask questions about, should the city regulate helmet use under 18? Ask some questions like that to get a gauge?
Well,
Yeah, we can work with Peter on maybe that specific
Okay.
wording on those questions, Scott and council. And I think the other thing too, in the meantime, as we do the survey, they could also give perhaps myself and you even as council to connect with Hennepin County. Because I think it would be beneficial if the county did a county-wide ordinance on helmets. So we could do two things here, two kind of tracks. One, let's do the survey. Also, let's connect with Hennepin County to see what track they're on. And if we're getting the sense in the coming months that they're gonna do something about helmets, then we wait for that to happen. But if we get the sense that it may take some time for Hennepin County to get there, we could do something sooner.
Okay.
In the survey data that's coming back to you, Moran, is it May? May? That's when, so in May. Now, May, think about timing of summer, to do like, so if we get the information in May, then you've got to think, then the next steps, if you do an ordinance based on that date, that's gonna be May, now it's gonna be perhaps June, if we do some Minnetonka Matters and solicit feedback, so you could be into July before an ordinance. So now you're in the heart of summer, while we're also trying to do some educational campaigns. So I'm trying to align all that.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
My
right.
perspective.
Yeah, I think it is too.
Or do you want to
So-
do something sooner?
No.
Because then
No.
we do educational campaigns.
No.
No,
before.
let's just, yeah.
Well, Can't we do the educational campaign?
Correct. I think we'll do
Educate-
education
yes.
regardless of your decision. We'll prepare to do education as we get into April and May.
But the reason I mentioned educational, holding off on education, because if you change the ordinance, we want to make that part of the literature. So if we're going to spend resources on literature and handouts, we also want to be able to articulate what it is that we're doing. And so that's the timing I'm thinking about.
Oh, yeah, we could still start some education though on like proper etiquette and
Wearing
reasonable,
helmets.
reasonable speeds and helmet, yeah. Your brain
Safety.
is
Really
vulnerable.
important.
Empathy for the other people who are
Thanks.
sharing the trail with
And
you.
to clarify, like, if we passed the helmet, it would be all bikes, right? All bike types for riders 18 and under.
And I think
On e-bikes, class 1, 2, and 3.
We can't do.
You're
it.
talking about just regular bicycles?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Oh, okay. Well, you could come back
I don't know that
with that
answer.
information, whether that can be included,
You?
because your head is just as vulnerable
Correct.
on a regular
makes sense.
bike. So, but we can visit that at a later time.
You know, yeah, okay.
So to
let's move on.
clarify, just to confirm that we will, staff will work on the questions with Peter that we talked about earlier. They work on the wording on those. We'll also then connect with the county on their plans. In May, that survey information will come back, and then council, once you get that information, we'll look for further direction from you on what those next steps look like, which could include an ordinance.
Okay, yep. Sounds good.
And then that would just, if I may ask a question myself,
Sure.
like if you have helmets, you require helmets, does that give folks a safe sense of security so they drive faster on e-bikes?
I don't think so.
I mean,
I don't think
used to
so.
drive a motorcycle, so I had to wear helmets. It does give you a sense of security. So
I don't know, I always wear a helmet, no matter what kind of bike I'm on, so, and,
So do I. Okay.
yeah, okay.
Let's go.
Yep, let's move on to our licensed residential care facilities.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. We'll turn that right over to Julie. So we'll just, I know we're up against our hour, so we'll dive right into, residential care facilities. Ms. Dahman? Yeah. So before, I almost forgot, the mayor did provide some comments
those, we printed out and are handing out.
You ready?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yep.
go ahead, Julie.
How long do you have? What are we doing? What's our time frame?
We're already over.
Fast.
Medium. Fast.
Fast.
We'll go through this. I forgot how many people were here when we actually adopted the last version of the ordinance. Was it just Deb that was here? Okay. All right, that helps me. Then I can make sure I, say the right things. The state statute, obviously governs some of this, much like the e-bike thing. There's lots of different regulations that play into licensed facilities or residential care facilities. There's also city code. We talked about separation requirements. That's kind of what brought us here today. And then we'll finally talk about some nuisance ordinances. I want to tell you how that's treated in terms of these types of homes. It dates way back to 1975, and if you didn't know that, it's been a long time that Minnesota has had the law to consider these types of homes and these kinds of care facilities as part of an allowed use as a single, they call it single family. We kind of use the term now single unit households, and they are to be treated the same way. And it's really about that levels of care or supervision was keeping people from being in a home situation. So that was a long time ago. It has been updated over the last 50 years. There's been little bits and pieces changed in the law, but in essence, the main part of the law has remained the same. And then the locals ordinances cannot be used to prevent people who have certain needs for care or supervision. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the current 2025 state statute. And we often pull this statute out when we're talking to residents who might be concerned about a group home or a licensed facility in their neighborhood. And again, it's up to 6 people that can be served. There's a lot of other language in here about 12 and daycare facilities, etc. But the main point is anything 6 or fewer can be allowed in a single unit household. So these are the kinds of licenses that are typically issued by the state. There's boarding home supervised living facilities, assisted living, and assisted living with dementia. Those are the types of licensing that is allowed by the state. And then in the city code, we just copy that statute basically and reflect back what the state law says. We did have some pictures from some of our previous work on this issue. So again, trying to show you what some of the group home locations look like in Minnetonka. Right now, as of today, and this changes pretty regularly, it's a daily activity. You might know that there's a licensed facility one day and then either that goes out of business or someone new pops in. Again, we don't know about that necessarily. What we do is we take all the data from the state Department of Health and also the Department of Human Services, and we compile that data, and then we GIS it into the map that you see, and all the red dots there kind of indicate the location. What's interesting about the map too, you can see it's throughout Minnetonka. It's not in one place, they're all over the city. I think that was the law's intent, that they be dispersed throughout neighborhoods and cities, but there is some clustering, and we'll talk about that in a minute. It's important to remember that the city can't require any special approval or any special condition. It doesn't even matter what kind of occupants are at the facility. So for instance, I think we put this in the report, if the occupants have primarily a brain injury versus maybe somebody going through drug withdrawal or drug treatment, you can't treat those facilities differently. So here is the case on Oak Knoll Terrace. One is a licensed residential care facility, and then one is what we would deem a single household dwelling. So that is a case where there are 2 in proximity. So of those 47 cases, you can see the right-hand
does place those other ones that have two locations in the same neighborhood, Baker Road, Caribou Drive, Crown Drive, Lake Street Extension, and then Norway Drive and Horn Drive have two. The proximity to each other, one on Caribou is pretty far apart. Crown is right next to each other, same thing on Baker. Lake Street Extension, there's a couple of houses in between, and the same on Norway. Other things on this slide, I think I already covered this. Oh, I think probably another thing to think about is, you know, the city can't prohibit certain people from buying property in the community or living in the community. We wouldn't do that for any persons living together. So I wanted to live with my cousin and my sister-in-law and someone else. Nobody gets to say whether or not I can do that. Same concept applies here. I know I don't have to tell you that, but sometimes I have to tell that to members of the public. So I thought it was worth mentioning here. And we also don't prevent somebody from a certain size. If they have a family of lots of people in their residence, we don't say, well, you can't live here because you have too many family members. So I think that goes without saying, but sometimes that recognition or that thought process does not go through certain people's minds when they call the city. We actually in '24 had some licensing changes that were enacted by the state, and we can now no longer license care facilities at all. And so Edina actually tried, or at least they thought about trying to impose minimum distances between their facility. We can't find that they actually ever introduced legislation. So it was on their legislative agenda, but I couldn't find out that they actually proposed something. In Minneapolis, I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding that there's a quarter-mile separation. There is some requirements for that, but not for what's called a state licensed facility. So I think people kind of mix that up and say, oh, they have some special legislation that they got out of the state for separation, and that's just not accurate. So we did some homework on that and found that that might be for certain facilities, but not state licensed. We in Minnetonka, though, do allow 7 to 10 by conditional use permit. And so we do have a number of homes in that situation in Minnetonka. They have to be located on a collector. They have to be a 1 acre lot. They have to have a FAR no larger than the FAR in the neighborhood, parking requirements, and then no exterior evidence of the use. That's different than a typical house. In 21, when we changed this ordinance, if Deb recalls us, we went from 12, we were allowing up to 12, and then we moved it down to 10. We're actually probably one of few cities that allows this by conditional use permit. And the reason, I think at the time, the council said, you know, we are looking for places for people to live. We want people to have these types of opportunities in our community. And there was a threshold kind of at that time at 12. What we're finding is maybe some heartburn maybe about that number 12, and then brought it back down to 10. 10 seemed to be the right number. When we actually went out and talked to the property owners living by these units that were a little bit larger, what we were finding is they actually weren't too critical of the uses. We were finding fair satisfaction with living in an area that had a larger group home. So that was actually surprising to us at the time. We thought we'd get more complaints about parking or activity level or deliveries and that sort of thing, but that just did not weigh out. And they actually got individual mailings to their houses to respond and participate in kind of this deep dive into what was going on.
I think there's also a sense like at 12 it starts feeling more institutional, and the whole idea is 7 to 10 is more residential feeling versus institutional.
Right. That's true. That's true. And I think that's how the council came to that decision in
Something that we always remind people of too, these residential care facilities have to deal with the same kind of ordinances any house would have to deal with. We have the same requirements for building fences, or in anything in poor repair, exterior lighting, if they have garbage or nuisance issues, we apply the same standards. It doesn't matter if it's a single family home or if it's a group home. So just a reminder that all those ordinances still apply. And then just some, we had taken a bunch of pictures of existing group homes in the city. And again, it's pretty hard in some situations to tell. There's a group home on the right side, you can kind of see the 2 cars deep. That it wouldn't be atypical of a single family. I think what maybe sometimes people see is a little bit more visiting. Maybe on the weekends, there might be more cars, that sort of thing. So in the packet, it just asks you to kind of weigh what you've heard tonight and see, what staff, if there's anything you want staff to work on. So that'll turn it back to you.
Well, I would say, and Mike and I looked at the League of Minnesota Cities, policy.
The policy document, yeah.
Policy document, and the committee I was on, I know recommended, and it's in the policy document, that to try and get that 2024 law repealed with the licensing for cities for facilities with 6 or fewer, because some cities are saying that that's their only way of inspecting properties and making sure that safety, that residents are safe, etc. Beyond that, I mean, until state law changes, there doesn't seem to be a lot that we can do beyond what is already being done. So, does anybody?
Yeah. Well, that was my question to Mike this morning in terms of whatever, in order to space things out. I mean, I was surprised that sort of in total, the number of group homes was pretty evenly distributed in each of the wards. That is not to say it's evenly distributed throughout the city, because if you go into the northwest corner of Ward 3, or even just the whole, the further west you get, the fewer there are. So, and then as you get down to the southeast corner also, then we start getting to high density, and they're really, or industrial, and so when you're in Opus, there's not as much of a opportunity there. So it's not geographically spaced, but per ward it is. So that's good. But I don't think we, as a city, can do much. But my question was, what are our options then? And so, is it something that we as a body would want to take to our committees at the League and see if they want to, help us? Because, some of the impetus for this whole question tonight is to make sure that we can maintain an appetite in the public for the noble purpose for which these statutes were enacted, to make sure that people of all abilities and all needs can live in our city and live in a home. And I think we start running into some pushback if you start having a whole row of homes that are not family homes. They are group homes. It's not a family. It's a different dynamic, and people will get heartburn or have gotten heartburn because they start feeling like it's being taken over. So I just want to make sure that we're, meeting our moral and other, official obligations, and also making sure that they truly are evenly, distributed if we're going to have them, but we can't do anything.
No. And I thought the whole thing precipitated by group home clustering.
Yes.
And so, and we did have complaints in
Yes.
Ward 1.
Mhm.
And so, and I, like.
Because Oak Knolls in Ward 1 and the Baker Road side by side are also in
Right.
Ward 1.
And I don't think that people are, like to Julie's point when she was saying people aren't complaining, they don't complain about that issue itself. What they complain about is that when they start seeing the property sort of like deteriorating.
Yeah.
And also there was some complaint that the residents themselves were like left unattended, and they were concerned about the residents themselves, which to me, which I was like, you should contact the county or the state attorney general.
Actually, the state.
The
Licensing.
state licensing. So, but again, it was very clear in the thing that we read that we can't facilitate them buying them close together. Like, we don't have any control. So, so I think it's true. There's nothing to be done really at this point.
We as a city can't.
Right.
But we could go to the league and say, this is happening. I don't have a good sense
Yeah.
of how much that's happening in neighboring cities, in neighboring like suburbs, and if people are complaining about it or not. That's something that,
I think that's
what
a good point.
what I hear from other cities is because, like, let's say they have a rental licensing ordinance and they cannot rental license these facilities, that the ability to swiftly deal with enforcement isn't as great. So what we do, and I know Scott and I work together all the time on various enforcement matters, and if there is a group home enforcement issue, let's just say we're getting a lot of complaints about, I don't know, let's say parking.
altercations in the front yard.
Altercations in the front yard, whatever it is. He and I will meet to try to sit down with the ownership to try to figure out what's happening. Is there a management problem? And again, we don't have a lot of jurisdiction to do that, but it's just something we've gotten, with 47 of them, you have to find a different way to approach it, and that's kind of how we've handled it. In terms of care, though, we do get a fair amount of people who will call us and say, hey, my friend, my loved one, somebody's in a living situation, and they're not being cared for properly, or their medication's not given to them, or whatever it is. And so there's a bunch of reaction to that. The police get notified, but also the state is then notified. So either Scott will or I will type in a complaint on the state's website on behalf of whoever has called us. So there's this, hopefully, some continuity in terms of the person complaining doesn't have to keep going to the next step. So it's not that we're responsible for that care, but we're reporting that the care has been called out to us. Again, we're not sure if it's true because we're not investigating it, but definitely we can insert that and put that on the state's website. So we have done that numerous times in the past. So.
But I mean, is this something that we should, be advocating for at the league? I'm on the Improving Services Delivery Committee. This is tangential, at least, to that. I mean, you were talking about on your committee, but, I thought it would be worth just mentioning. It's something that's starting to pop up, and, maybe we can get some
That's a good
information.
idea. I think that's
I have a question.
reasonable.
Are you talking about taking action on clustering, or are you talking about requiring rental licensing for less?
I'm talking mostly about clustering. I'm talking about our.
The licensing, it's already in League of Minnesota Cities policy. Priorities. The clustering is not.
Got it. Thank you.
So yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So before we go to our last thing, I know everybody wants to get out of here, but since we have the chief here, we were could you talk to us a little bit about ICE and the, what's going on with that?
And thank you for your statement.
Yes.
Yes, I will. And so this happened similarly in 2016 at a much smaller scale, but I can recall meeting with several organizations really talking about local government, our role in immigration status checks, roundups, you name it. And so, but this time it's quite different. And so I've met with the DEI Commission last week, talked to them, and then ICA had contacted us because they have seen a decrease in people coming in for services, for being in fear of whether they're tracking or someone's going to show up. And so I went down there one night, and they had they had invited other nonprofits from the area, and there was 60 plus people in attendance. And then I went there the second day, and there was a smaller group. But my message to them is this: we're not under the federal jurisdiction. They have no control over your local police department. We don't enforce federal law. Immigration is all under the federal authorities. What we do today is no different than what we did last year, 2 years ago. We have not changed our practice. I don't know what they're doing in our area. We have reached out to see if we can have a contact to find out. We hear what's going on as much as you do in the news, and quite frankly, I don't know what's factual and what's not, but it's very disturbing, because when people are afraid to call us, bad things can happen. I mean, bad situations, they don't want to get us involved because they're not sure what's going to happen. So our concern is that if people are afraid to call the police because we're going to ask about immigration, they're not going to call us. And so I had reassured them that we don't ask. You don't have to have, you can still have a driver's license in Minnesota. You don't have to, so there's ID that we look at as driver's license. And so that was my message to them, is that we don't do that, because I also heard that there's advice to carry your papers, so when you are stopped, you display them. And so what's concerning to me is, I can just imagine on the side of the road, I have someone being stopped and someone's showing their papers. The officers are they don't want anything to do with them, and then it's really unfortunate. I wish we had more direction from our federal partners on what's going on in our area. And so that's really it. I mean, it's just really assuring them that your local police department, we don't ask for your status, we don't ask for any paperwork. The other thing is that we want to make people aware there are folks that could scam you. And so you may have officials claiming their ICE and trying to extort money from people not to be reported. And so our message to ICA was, if you have concerns, call us. We will come down and verify the credentials. Our role is really to keep the peace, to make sure we know what's going on in our community. We have instructed our officers, if you're contacted by anybody at ICE, to report that to our on-call director, just so we know what's going on. We've had zero interaction with ICE officials. We still have partnerships with other federal agencies, but I don't know what they're doing here.
Okay.
If anything.
Can I just, for the record, so I've seen stories of states that are not Minnesota, where law enforcement actually participates in raids and showing up at schools and dragging kids out, and horrifying stories. So if ICE were to contact the police department and say, hey, we need your help, what is the response?
We will not participate in a raid. What you're hearing is, I know there's some states way down in the south, and to do that, they have to be deputized. And so there are local governments in sheriff's departments in Florida and Texas that are able to deputize their officers to then enforce those regulations. I would be very surprised that anything would come to Minnesota, or any agency would. The sheriff's office, they have a decision to make in their jail. And so, we could have two individuals, we could have a domestic, and we arrest the person. We won't know if they're here legally or not. They go to jail, we still don't know. And the sheriff, I know from talking to her, is they don't either. They're not concerned about immigration status, because again, it could really hamper our ability to respond to needs that people have. And that's our message, and so to your, that would be, I know the answer, and,
Right.
and, yeah.
Yeah, just people ask, and so.
Absolutely.
We want to be able to.
I'm
assure
sure that'd
them.
be a discussion that would come forward, and yeah, I definitely know what our role is, and, but I have heard that's happening in the south.
Yes, I have heard that too. Right. Anybody else have any questions around ICE?
I guess, is there, and I don't know, has there been anything that went into our Sun Sailor newspaper or anything that's gonna go out to the community around that? I think.
You mean like a statement?
Yeah, a statement or something,
Yeah.
even in the newsletter or whatever, just on a bigger scale where people can know. like, in
So,
this community.
I'm the president of the Hennepin Chiefs Association, so last week I requested through our members to put out a message to really reassure what our role is. It did not get picked up widely. I mean, it went out it was pushed out to all the media outlets. I know maybe of one that reported on it. It was really just all of us reassuring that Hennepin County agencies do not enforce federal immigration statuses. And it just didn't get picked up.
But maybe they scared.
What's that?
I said maybe they scared. They scared. Everybody want to touch it, you know. Like
Yeah,
it's retaliation.
and we did send, we have subscribers that look for specific information from police in Minnetonka. All of our subscribers received it, but that's probably not the right, they're not the ones that are probably, getting the messages. It's like, and so I think opportunities like ICA, and I always encourage if there's any other groups that want us to come and meet, we're willing to do that, and so.
I think ICA maybe even places of worship, because I know that that there is a certain amount of justified horror at the thought of immigration officials going into places of worship and rounding people up. And I know that there are places of worship that are really concerned about that, so.
All right, well, thank you. So yeah, I think we're down to our final item. Let's go.
There's no pressure in that one, is there?
You have 2 minutes,
2
Mr.
minutes,
Funk,
okay,
go.
I'll make it less than that. Thank you. Well, March, our next study session is, excuse me, March, what do we got here, March? I'm gonna look it up here myself. So March 24th is the next study session, as I mentioned. So we'll start the budget kickoff with that meeting. So we'll have director presentations, as you heard last time about this time of year. So we'll have our 8 directors kick off with a PowerPoint, just really highlighting what happened last year, what's on the horizon in 2025, much of what you've already kind of just talked about here recently. So that'll be setting the budget. Then we'll also have a conversation on trail connections and gaps. So Mr. Manchester, sitting over there, will be coming in March to talk about trail connections. And so we'll have a conversation about that. And then we have our first 30-minute open time and conference debrief also. So we'll get that teed up. I'll likely reach out to council in preparation of that 30-minute open time, start to flesh out some topics that you want to bring forward. So that is coming up, and then if you can, I haven't looked if you've responded to the doodle poll and getting a retreat scheduled. So hopefully if you respond to that, please do so. So that is March, and then April, we'll have our fire station analysis, service level objectives. So Chief Fox will be here on those 2 items. And then Ms. Dahman will lead us through a review process for the city manager. So that's coming in April. So that's the next couple months. If there's anything changing that, you have to let us know. Otherwise, that's on the docket.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Anybody, anything else?
All good.
Nope, okay, then we are adjourned.